interesting because Reid, as we get into the match here, he's the one who's going to have options as far as, different ways in which his deck can play out. Both of these are curve outs. They're going to be looking to put everything they can onto the battlefield as soon as possible. If that happens from both sides, you have to feel that Ken would have a slight edge there as his deck just packs a little more punch in the early part of the game. But that said, Reid has a very strong late game in these decks thanks to the adventure cards coming down. The other thing that I'm curious to see from Ken's perspective primarily is if any of his hate cards end up mattering. Right, if they come down and end up being relevant here, the Dranith Magistrates card that I talked about before that can have an impact on the game. We see both players kicking things off with a 2-drop, no 1-drop from either of them. Luminarch Aspirant, though, on the other side, looks to go long game here against the Rimrock Knight as Reid gets the beatdowns going, chips in there for 3. He's going to cast Edgewall Innkeeper into another Rimrock Knight. That's going to generate him a card as well, or no, it won't. Okay, attack, and in we go.
Well, for Ken, who's in some trouble here, he's got multiple copies of Luminarch Aspirant, so that's not a bad place to be. And able to grow one probably to, we'll probably see maybe a 3-3 to 2-2. We could also just see one become a 4-4 here if we want to go that route. The good news, and it's not a ton because Ken did mulligan to 5, but the good news here is that we aren't seeing a Bone Crusher Giant, more importantly, Stomp, take care of one of those Luminarch Aspirants thus far. That said, however, Marshall, we do have a pretty good look at Reid's hand. It's pretty stock-loaded here with multiple copies of Lovestruck Beast and the incredibly powerful Embercleave.
Yeah, I'm seeing that Embercleave here set, and looking at it, if I'm in Ken's seat, I'm thinking, okay, what if my opponent has Embercleave? And as we see, pre-combat, let's just play a land and attack with 2 creatures that lines up perfectly to be able to cast an Embercleave. And Ken just says, I'm just going to take it. And Reid seems fine with just building out a board here. He's going to go Lovestruck Beast he's going to go make the token and then into Lovestruck Beast. And that also, of course, gets him a card off the Innkeeper. And you can see why he doesn't really feel the rush here.
Yeah, this is a tough road to hoe. Yeah, I mean, this Giant Killer turn, it would look good under normal circumstances, right? You chop down that Lovestruck Beast, you play Giant Killer, you get 2 triggers from your Luminarch Aspirant. But it's Embercleave that's going to ultimately win this game for Reid at some point. Because as Ken is building up this battlefield of 4-4, 3-4, the other Luminarch Aspirant just kind of counters being passed around up and down. It's that mulligan, well, actually 2 of them, to 5, but also Reid has an Edgewall Innkeeper that is going completely unchecked, Marshall.
That's right, and you know how that goes. I mean, you just can't. You have to be killing your opponent if you're going to let them have an Innkeeper, or you have to kill the Innkeeper. But if you just allow, Ken hasn't attacked in 2 turn cycles. I mean, he's just sitting there, and he took 6 damage off of the 2 Rimrock Knights last turn. Maybe breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief that there may not be an Embercleave on the other side, but there is.
This is curious.
Look at this cute little attack here. Reid's going to just attack with 1 Rimrock Knight.
So one thing that Reid's going to try to play around to the best of his ability is Chop Down when it comes to Embercleave. So this is a window to actually get Embercleave in without having to worry about Chop Down because Ken is tapped out. There you get in, your little bit of trample damage. So 3 is going to come through. Actually, 4 is going to come through and all that jazz. So not a bad turn there for Reid as far as the attack is concerned. Now you do have Chop Down on this Rimrock Knight if you want to do it now, or do you want to wait and use it as an instant in combat? That's a decision that Ken needs to make right now. The tough part here is that he doesn't have the ability to play Chop Down and Redain in the same turn because only has access to 5 mana. So now he has to make a real decision of maybe I'm just going to pass with Chop Down up and just pass a turn back because Chop Downing in your main phase isn't all that beneficial. You chop down the Rimrock Knight right now, right? That one's gone. Okay, cool. On my turn, if I'm Reid, I'll assess the battlefield, maybe move the Embercleave over to the other Rimrock Knight, attack that way, whatever. So I think you just have to pass with Chop Down available.
Yeah, it makes it basically a tempo play, taking out the creature with Embercleave on it, and means that Ken gets to survive.
Yeah.
The problem for him, of course, is that we look at Reid's hand here, and it's still stocked. He's got 2 copies of Shatterskull Smashing and a Lovestruck Beast with that Edgewall Innkeeper still on the battlefield, and it just doesn't feel like there's a lot of directions for Ken to go here to get out of this mess. Wow, there's Hall of Oracles as well. And, I will note as well, that was the first successful attack there for Ken. I mean, Reid was at 20.
Yeah, I mean, you got to start somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the best place to start. Reid's was at 20, now it's 17. We know he's got his card advantage engine online. He's got his key equipment on the battlefield. And he's got plenty of cards in his hand. And, Reid Duke, when he has options, not great for the other side of the battlefield.
Not in the slightest. And you can see Reid's thinking through his turn, but he has a lot of very solid options ahead of him. It does look like, he's going to go for Shatterskull Smashing here. He can pay 4 for this, and that will take out the Luminarch Aspirant sitting on their side of the battlefield. Somehow he's able to get this in. Ken hasn't found any of his, 8 different cards he has that protect his creature. Just hasn't seen him this time.
Yeah, hasn't found him this game at all. So this is tough, too, because this is going to clear that up. You're going to see Ken cast that chop down on the 4-power Embercleave equipped creature, but he's still going to take 5 and fall down to 2. I have to imagine that Reid's going to attack with everything here. Yeah, so there's the attack with everything. This is a big draw here for Ken. It's another copy of it's another copy of Giant Killer.
Wow. That is a lot of Giant Killers.
and it's a good card in the matchup. That's the thing that's probably a little bit frustrating here, is that this is a solid card in this matchup. But the mulligans have been difficult, and also just the inability to be at 6 mana so you can double spell in a pretty meaningful way. Playing a Giant Killer off of an adventure and now having chopped that up isn't that bad. But it's one of the very few things that Reid has to play around. When you're playing its mono white, there's not like a lot of removal spells that you have to think about of, what my opponent has mana, what do I have to do? What do I have to care about? Like if I'm Reid, yeah, it's the 3rd copy of Giant Killer, but I can play around it successfully.
Yeah, this is kind of an embarrassment of riches at this point from Reid. Yes, he's being careful and going into the tank, but this is, do you want cake or ice cream? I mean, he's had great choices every single game every single turn, about what kind of lines he wants to take, and he's just trying to be careful to not rush it.
Yeah, I mean, this turn, and this is easy for me to say because I'm working with perfect information just like you are and everybody else watching at home, It would make some sense to just maybe play the Chariot and Heart's Desire off a Lovestruck Beast and pass the turn back, right? And then I could see a world where you're doing that as opposed to Shatterskull Smashing your 4/4 Luminarch Ascension and attack with all my stuff. It's like, you don't really need to go that nuts. And I think Reid knows he doesn't have to go that nuts, and he doesn't even have to really get involved with Embercleave this turn. He can kind of just play it a little bit slower and continue to build his battlefield out in a wide manner, and then start to work himself into, maybe I want to Embercleave this turn, maybe I want to work further towards Shatterskull Smashing, stuff like that. So not really in that big of a rush. And I actually like this turn a lot. I'm just going to make a 4/2 this way. Now, if you want to chop down this Rimrock Knight, that's fine, but I haven't committed much mana this turn as far as equipping Embercleave. I've actually built my board out, activated Hall, and now this is a lethal attack, so you got to do something about it.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I said cake or ice cream. Reid said, I'll have a little of both, thank you.
Yeah,
he didn't have the full piece of cake or the whole bowl of ice cream, but he got just enough there to force Ken to react to him yet again. And, that Embercleave is just looming down on the battlefield, equipped on anything. It's going to be lethal effectively. And he was also able to net himself another card and build out his board while also applying another lethal attack and forcing Ken to either trade off a key creature or use a removal spell. He ended up using the removal spell there. Ken does find a Skyclave Apparition that's going to take care of the Lovestruck Beast. He gets the counter from the Luminarch Aspirant, but it still doesn't feel like it's going to be enough here.
I mean, he just continues to be behind. This is a situation for Ken where he has to kind of draw the perfect spell every single turn, and Reid doesn't have to do that. Reid is continuously drawing cards because of Edgewell Innkeeper. He has a Shatterskull Smashing to play towards, so that means that if he continues to draw lands, he's okay. And then he has a Seeker's Chariot as well as something to play towards now as well. So I don't see this game really slipping away from Reid. You see Reid kind of leaning in and really focusing, just trying to think of, all right, how do I go about losing this game? How do I go about getting these last 2 points of damage across? Ken is beginning to feel as though he's stabilizing, but I think we got a little ways to go until he's fully stabilized. So I don't mind this line of play here from Reid, which is a pretty healthy Shatterskull Smashing.
Yeah, and once again, he's going to get a creature back on his side from the Apparition. He's going to take out 2 creatures here, Shatterskull for 5. Showing the raw power of that card as well. Tap target creature before the thing dies, but that's going to, again, replace a creature on the side for Reid Duke here. Sure, no attacks this turn. He doesn't want to throw away his Innkeeper, but once again, and you put this beautifully, Cedric, he's forcing Ken to keep top decking relevant spells, and there's only so much of that you can actually do.
Well, that's actually kind of interesting. So,
oh, he played Valkmira. Oh,
yeah, we don't see that a ton. And there are a healthy number of 1-power creatures out there. So, all right, we play on a little bit here. It appears
this is kind of interesting. I didn't see that coming.
We don't see that happen to card cast all that often. But when it matters, it certainly does matter. So, not a bad place to be if you're Ken here. I mean, Ken is hanging on, clinging on for dear life here of just, let me see if I can somehow scrap out another turn and another turn and another turn. And the chances of Reid just, brick walling over and over and over again are pretty low, because we got to remember, Stomp works itself into the equation here in this game as well. So we can't forget that too. But for right now, I think Ken might get another turn here.
A couple of Asika's Chariots and an Edgewall Innkeeper in hand here for Duke. He's been on the precipice of winning this thing for about 5 turns in a row now.
Can still go to this. Can still use Embercleave and serve on in.
That's right. This is the easy part. So this is interesting because Valkmira will prevent one of this. Which would mean that the Aspirant will survive the first double strike hit.
Ken's trying to decide if he needs to double block here, which is...
it's a little complicated.
Yep. There we go.
But this does allow the token to trade off for the Luminarch Aspirant here. So the first strike hit only does 3, but then the next one will...
Oh no!
Oh, look what happened there. Did you see that from Reid?
Yeah, you don't ever see that from Reid. He missed it. Oh, wow.
What a crazy interaction.
He missed to assign his damage. Wow.
He needed to assign all of it. Oh, that's crazy.
Oh,
the way it works is if a source an opponent controls would deal damage to you or a permanent you control, prevent one of that damage. So if you spread the damage across permanents, it reduces it further. Yeah. And so Reid ended up actually 1 short on both creatures, and Ken got to keep them both.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
This is getting interesting, Cedric.
I guess what I would say is that's very non-Reid Duke-esque.
No,
perhaps he got Arena there. I'm not sure, but
I mean, it's hard, right? Like Valkmira is a weird card.
Yikes. Okay, so now the plot thickens. So let's see. These 1/1s don't matter, essentially. So now we're just looking at the 2/2/2 cats and the chariot. All right. Ken has left up 2 mana for a giant killer activation as opposed to playing the Seasoned Hallowblade. Okay. So that means he's basically saying, whatever you equip with Embercleave, I've got checked with the giant killer activation. So that's really not an avenue that Reid wants to go down, I have to imagine.
You can see that Embercleave costs 8 mana now thanks to Redain as well as Asika's Chariot number 2 if more squirrels or cats or whatever they are is on the horizon here. Boy, Reid is like, I made my life a lot harder here by leaving that Luminarch Aspirant. He was willing to trade off his token for the Aspirant. That part he was happy to do.
So let's see, is this an attack with everybody and then just hard cast Embercleave? It is. Okay. Which you'll still be able to do. It's going to cost 5 because of Redain, but this will be fine, right? So you get the unblocked creature. Right. You equip the Embercleave. It's going to become a 2-power creature, and then Redain's going to, the Valkmira is going to be, it's going to make it a little bit less, but it's going to be enough. So oddly enough, an Embercleave top deck, when Embercleave was already on the battlefield, was good enough.
Wow, and it was an Embercleave top deck that costs 2 extra mana on top of what it normally does, and even then, it was Xaxes. It got Ken to exactly 0. Wow, that was crazy. the impact of that one turn with the Valkyria there was monumental. It meant that Reid had to kind of get lucky there, or he may have not been able to come back from that situation, especially given that Ken's board was growing every turn thanks to the Luminar gas spread. But Reid is able to escape the mistake that he made in the middle part of that game and come away with the victory. He's going to need to kind of shake it off here and focus in. If you're in Ken's seat, boy, you almost made the sit come back there.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a game in which Ken mulliganed to 5 and was just kind of working his way back into a little bit there. But, not his best draw. Things do get better for him after sideboard. You got to like a card like Glass Casket coming in from the sideboard, maybe the Shadow Spear as well, as far as options are concerned, Banishing Light as well. So I imagine things get a little bit better for him after sideboard. Can say the same about Reid, though. I would imagine Reid wants some number of his Elder Gargaroths coming from the sideboard, maybe the Akroan War, maybe a card like Red Cat Melee. I know that, you're not in a red matchup, but it could still be useful. So there's some options here for both players. And what ended up being, Marshall, a pretty compelling first game.
It really was. Good stuff there from our players. And they're going to consult their sideboards now.
Very interesting.
Yeah, it looks like we're just about to get back into the action.
Yeah, this is definitely, and probably those Drannith Magistrates are going to come in too. So it looks like Reid has moved in 3 Glass Caskets, 2 Drannith Magistrates, a Banishing Light, and a Lurrus of the Dream Den. And all 4 seasoned Hollow Blades have left that Maul of the Skyclaves and 2 Elite Spellbinders. Excuse me, for Ken. That's how he has shifted things up a little bit here for you Mono White fans out there like myself.
All right. Well, let's get back into the action here and see how this goes. Looks like Reid's looking down at a hand with 2 red mana sources, but no green to be seen. And what about for Ken? I see some planes, a couple of giant killers, a casket, and what is that card over on the right there? Maybe a magistrate. Can't see it.
Looks like Elite Spellbinder.
A Spellbinder.
Yeah, gotcha. One of the two copies that he's left in.
Oh yeah, there's Paulo now peeking up over the edge. Forced right away here for Duke means that he's all set to go as well as far as his mana.
Pretty good start here from Reid. 2 copies of Bonecrusher Giant and Embercleave to play towards. Just Bear Sentinel, totally fine, of course. So that's going to come on down and join the party. And Elite Spellbinder, a card I do like. I don't think it's at its best in this matchup, which is why I think we saw Ken sideboard a couple of them out. But it's a totally fine card, and it's at the very least you're going to get some information. And information is always a nice thing to have when you're playing against the best players in the world. So now he gets to know exactly what's going on in Reid's hand.
Yeah, looking at Ken's face, it looks like the information was received as bad news because he's like, oh no, the double Bone Crusher's got to be real problematic here for Ken.
I mean, I wouldn't be thrilled looking at this hand. There's an interesting thing about getting information. Sometimes you don't like what you see.
For sure.
You might think, okay, well, I can navigate around all of this stuff, and sometimes you can't navigate around all of this stuff. So
that's right.
Sometimes it can be a bummer seeing the opponent's hand.
He ended up spellbinding the Elder Gargaroth, so that thing's going to be on the sidelines for the foreseeable future. But Reid has plenty to do with his mana here. He can Bone Crusher Giant, Hall of Oracles, activate that thing too, and then even get in with a 2/3 Sentinel. Taste it.
Tasted. It was delicious and nutritious.
Yummy. Spoon it up. Back over, and this is going to be Glass Casket to take care of the Jespera Sentinel. Is there a follow-up here for Kent? No, he's just going to pass the turn back over.
Well, we're going to try to play like this kind of control game with chop downs and giant killers and Skyclave apparitions. The fear I have here, of course, is that how are we going to go about killing Reid? Basically, you've done this really nice job of delaying Elder Gargaroth, but you're not killing your opponent particularly quickly either. This game his draw has not lined up that way. So though Gargaroth's going to cost 7 mana, probably still going to show up to this party.
That's right. Yeah, I would expect to see it at some point. Esika's Chariot's the most obvious play here for Reid. He does go over his options, but decides, yep, let's just get the Chariot on the battlefield. Here comes Skyclave Apparition. And that's going to take care of that Chariot right now. But no, the raw power of Chariot is on display here, right? Leaving the 2/2/2 cat tokens behind. That's awesome, the name of the game. Yeah, awesome just card. A sweet card. Lovestruck Beast off the top of the library. No shortage of action once again for Reid Duke, although It is interesting seeing Ken's hand with the 2 giant killers. He does have answers for, say, a Bone Crusher Giant and a Lovestruck Beast, for example. He's just going to need a little more to build out a bigger board. Another Luminarch Aspirant or something like that to help him get something rolling. Because right now he's actually just going to fall behind the leftovers, right? Like Reid is, even if Ken takes out some of the bigger creatures, there's just going to be enough random 2/2s and eventually a Gargaroth on the battlefield to take care of business.
Yeah, in a spot like this is kind of a weird thing to say, but it's like it's a spot where, like, if I'm Ken, I kind of wish I had like a Baneslayer Angel to cast.
Oh,
right?
yeah,
Like
right.
Just something that was like kind of big, has first strike, kind of overpowering. And you don't really have anything like that. Like, you're making kind of like a bunch of microtransactions right now that don't really favor you. Like this giant killer, chop down in a giant killer. It's like, okay, that's fine. Glass Cascade, it's fine. Like, it's all fine. But the adventure mechanic is so powerful, Marshall, as we all know by now, that it's like, yeah, you made a bunch of microtransactions and you have 1 card left in hand, and Reid has 2 on an adventure, a Gargaroth, which is on we can call it a super adventure, I guess.
Yeah, really long trip. Yeah.
Yeah, and then 3 cards in hand.
Right.
So how are you catching up? Where's your Ranger of Eos? Something like that, and it's non-existent.
Yeah, this deck is light on haymakers. It's true. It's going for the longer term stuff with like the aspirants and that type of thing. But I mean, if you end up with a couple of giant killers after the dust settles and your opponent ends up with a couple of giants, you're in a precarious position at that point. I mean, sure, they can hold them back, but that is a house of cards that looks like it may tumble. And here, that does seem where we find Ken here. He's going to fire off Chop Down to take out the Bone Crusher, fall to 9. Embercleave in hand for Reid. Ken knows about it, but sometimes knowing about it doesn't mean that you don't die to it.
Yeah, and as you can see, as I mentioned kind of a little bit earlier in the game too, is that we did this work to make Gargaroth cost 7, but when you're not actually pressuring your opponent and getting your opponent dead, as great as Elite Spellbinder is as far as getting information and delaying the inevitable got here pretty darn quick. And we might see Gargaroth this turn. If we don't see Gargaroth this turn, I'd feel awful if I was Ken. You're like, oh, it's not that thing you can cast? Oh, great.
Right. It has to be worse for you. So here's Hall of Oracles. By the way, this is the 3rd time that Reid's got to activate that powerful land. It's having a major impact on this game as well. A little underrated, perhaps, as, it's throwing some counters around. This is a big attack here as well because of the Embercleave. Again, Ken knew about this. And it's just up to Reid to decide if he'd rather kind of start clearing away the board or get in for a little bit. He figures, look, I'm going to have lethal next turn anyway. And in fact, he'll have it now. So Reid, with the misstep in the first game, he escapes with the victory. That was a really interesting game 1. This one wasn't very close, right? No. We didn't really get to see any of the cool interactions that Ken brought to the table. The Drannith Magistrate never showed up to kind of lock out those 3 cards that were on adventures or exiled or whatever. Instead, it was a lot of chop downs and a little too fair from the other side. Ken's deck is capable of doing some more powerful things, but in this case, it was just a clean outdraw there by Reid, and he was able to use that advantage to win pretty easily that second game.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to sum it up, if you want to make it really, really simple as far as the summary is concerned, one player got to play a lot more adventures than the other. Ken did draw a couple copies of Giant Killer and Chop Down, and those cards are good in the matchup. Don't get me wrong. We saw Chop Down get cast 4 or 5 times over the course of 2 games, but Bone Crusher Giant, Lovestruck Beast, those cards are undeniable. They're absolutely fantastic, and they kind of reared their ugly head over the course of those 2 games, and also some Ember Cleaving action took place as well. So good stuff there between Reid and Ken, but ultimately Reid kind of, I don't want to say coasting, but it didn't look too tough there for him to get that victory.
That's right. And of course, it is a reminder how interesting and complex our game is, right? I mean, that interaction that Reid faced down in the first game with Valkmira, that's the type of thing that even a professional of Reid's level might overlook and go, yeah, okay, damage is good. I'm going to kill the things, and then go, right. And that's one of the reasons why we all still love this game so much. Okay, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll have another match from this round. Don't go anywhere. And welcome back to coverage here. We got a little league weekend action for you. We're still in the standard rounds. Marshall Sutcliffe with Cedric Phillips. Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate you taking the time to hang out. And our next match coming up is going to be a Sultai Ultimatum Mirror. It was the most popular deck in the field. So can't be too surprised to see two players going at it with these decks. We've got Stanislav Cifka coming in, I think number one in the rankings for his group. And he's got, well, let's see, anything interesting here? Cultivate.
Let's see. A main deck copy of Disdainful Stroke brings a little bit of attention to my eyeball. Main deck copy of Negate, a little bit of attention. Main deck copies of Asika's Chariot. We're resolving Ultimatum, and we've got Professor Onyx, which some players like and some players don't. Multiple copies of Shadow's Verdicts. I'm just looking for what we're hitting when we resolve Ultimatum, which is Valky, Onyx, Alrund's Epiphany. Okay, so kind of run-of-the-mill stuff. The Vorniclex stuff is long gone now at this point, which makes sense. So, Ultimatum's still going to be a game winner. There's a couple different ways, of course, you can go about doing it, but that's the goal of the deck, as we all know.
Okay, let's take a look at what Kowalski's brought as far as his Ultimatum list goes.
Well, I was wrong.
Oh.
I was like, Vorticlex is gone, not for Kowalski. He does have Vorticlex. He does not have Professor Onyx. Has Kiora, Best the Sea God. Also has the Valky. Some players like to play Quandrix Cultivator, You're seeing Kowalski has one copy here. Cifka didn't have any. So, you can make some changes minorly. I mentioned the Negate that Cifka had. I'm not seeing one here. As far as maybe a little bit of counter magic to be able to counter Emergent Ultimatum. So some minor differences that, of course, could make a major difference in this matchup here from both players.
Yeah, that's a good way to put that. Cifka with perhaps a slight nod towards the mirror with the main deck Negate, and that's the type of card that if drawn can break it. It really can. This deck can do quite a few powerful things, but as you mentioned, it really does hinge on resolving Emergent Ultimatum to kind of put it over the top, and if you can counter one of those, hey, that can be a game winner, no problem at all. These two players getting ready to battle it out here. We're going to be coming in game number 2 for this match. Sometimes these games can go quite long, and this is our secondary match here. So we're going to come in game number 2 and see how things go between these two.
Excited
looks like
to see
we're underway.
Who can resolve the 7-mana spell.
Yeah. Well, good start for both of them by having it in their opening hands, because if they're going to resolve it, they're going to have to draw one. But let's see. Any good ramp here from either player? No, not really. You see a binding there for Cifka. That'll help. Oh, I spoke too soon. Cultivate off the top for Kowalski, telling me to just shut my mouth. Unreal, Kowalski. Wow.
Had it, as they say.
Yeah, never didn't. All right. Well, that's a game changer, though, for sure. Cifka's got a much, much slower draw here. Binding the Old Gods looks to be his way of getting his mana rolling. He does have Behold the Multiverse that he foretold last turn, so he'll be able to cast that. But not hitting your Cultivate on 3 here is a pretty big deal.
Yeah, because now you're just kind of behind a little bit. But again, Cifka, though he's behind as far as mana is concerned, he does have cheap counter magic to interact. And that's important, of course. Mystical Dispute and Disdainful Stroke just kind of hanging out. So.
Okay, there's Behold the Multiverse on end step here for Cifka.
I like that card a lot. Behold the Multiverse is a card that once it was previewed and how good it was in the limited format in Kaldheim, I expected maybe a little more constructed play, but it's still got plenty of time in its lifespan. It's a really nice Magic card.
Yeah, it is. Really sweet design. Just love the card. Boy, the mana advantage is stark at this point, isn't it? You can see 6 mana there for Kowalski already, while Cifka's on 3 going to 4. You will sometimes see the players fire off cards like Binding into an empty board if they have to. Maybe you take out a Wolf Willow Haven or something, just to try to get that ramp going. but it looks like he's going to have to settle for a tap land. And then on end step, Omen of the Sea here for Kowalski. So things looking pretty good for Grzegorz here. Ooh, little dispute there.
Yeah. Well, is it go time? Are we going to
Is
try
it go
for it
time?
now?
That's the question, isn't it? And it looks like the answer is no. It's going to be Yori and Sky Nomad to maybe just test the waters here for Kowalski. This allows him to leave up Mystical Dispute as well.
Yeah, and this also makes a lot of sense, right? Because the next turn, assuming mana cooperates in the way that it should, you're able to play Emergent Ultimatum in combination with Mystical Dispute to protect it. And then, as we all kind of know at this juncture, once Emergent Ultimatum resolves, especially in the mirror, things should end pretty quickly.
Clever here as well for Kowalski. He's going to blink his Wolf Willow Haven, move it to an untapped land. That'll actually give him the ability to hard cast Mystical Dispute if needed.
Really good point. And that was a pretty cute play. Pretty cute play, excuse me.
Yeah, I like that. He doesn't need to do it this time. He finds another Wolf Willow Haven. But as you mentioned, he does have access to Emergent Ultimatum plus Mystical Dispute backup if he feels that he'd like to press his advantage right now.
Yeah, I'm curious if he wants to let it rip here. It's kind of, I mean, it's kind of enticing.
I'm also curious. Do you just go for it, or do you hold? No, he's going to go for Wolf Willow Haven, it looks like. I mean, he is ahead significantly here with Yorion on the battlefield. He's got way more mana than his opponent. He can kind of just be a boa constrictor here and start squeezing and make Cifka react to him by tapping a bunch of mana. He can then counter whatever it is with Dispute and then just slam Emergent Ultimatum and get him.
Yeah, we're going to play this game from the perspective of we don't know what Cifka has, which makes kind of a fun little bit of experience here. It's kind of like actually playing a real game of Magic, right? We've got Kowalski's view of the game, and we don't know what our opponent really has going on in their hand. So
yeah, I like it like this, actually. Yeah, the syncing was just a little bit off for Cifka's side of the stream, and it can be confusing to watch, so we decided just to take it away for now. But as you said that lets us get into the seat of Kowalski with not as much information. You have to kind of look at it from his perspective.
All right. Well, the easy part's attacking for 4. Drawing All Runs Epiphany is pretty nice too, because this is a great test spell of like, hey, this is definitely worth countering because a time walk style effect, in addition to having 2 1/1s generated, that's not really a bad place to be. So again, I'm curious to see how Kowalski wants to lead out, if he wants to lead out in any meaningful way at all. And it looks like he's just going to foretell this. Again, just kind of feeling as though I'm advantaged. I don't have to do anything crazy. And I can just kind of, until you actually do something of consequence. And this kind of counts.
Sure, this is finally going to take the clock off the battlefield because, as you were saying, I mean, Grzegorz could just be like, you're dead in 3 turns, do something. And this is going to limit Cifka's options, though, with regards to counter spells coming back. You know, worst case would be like negate plus Mystical Dispute or something from Kowalski. So he's going to have to decide, well, do I want to play around 2 castable counter spells here for my ultimatum? Because he does have his own dispute to take care of one of them.
Yeah. You know, if you are in this situation, it's pretty appealing to just go, you know, ultimatum, you counter. All right, I dispute your counter spell, and then they dispute you back, and it's like, crap. Because then what could happen, of course, is then Cifka untaps, casts his own ultimatum, and then the game more or less ends on the spot. So you gotta be a little cagey. You gotta be a little sure if you want to actually fire this thing off. So it looks like you can go a simpler route and say, how about All Runs Epiphany?
Yeah, this gives him the upside of being able to just outright pay for dispute if he chose to. Interestingly, I don't know that he would. You know, dispute may just be a hard counter here if Stanislav fires it off because of the line of play that you just outlined. And it's going to be a disdainful stroke, so an actual hard counter. And again, we see that Kowalski has the option to protect his All Runes Epiphany with Mystical Dispute if he'd like. He chooses not to for the reasons that you described.
Yeah, All Runes Epiphany, just a kind of a glorified test spell there from Kowalski, but it's good enough that Cifka wanted to interact with it, so he did so. Binding the Old God's going to now go get a Triumph, it looks like, and Stan is going to play another Binding the Old Gods. Okay, I was confused briefly. I'm like, what is that killing? But it kills a Wolf Willow. It kills a Haven, which actually kind of matters, even though it feels like it shouldn't.
Yeah. Yeah, anytime you can take an opponent off of some mana in a matchup like this, it actually counts.
Yeah, when a card like Mystical Dispute, that's perfect.
Ooh,
Okay,
that's clean living. Duress off the top of the library is exactly what you wanted to see. All that guessing, all that, can I get away with this? Is this the right thing? Am I taking on too much risk? Now you just get to know.
Yeah.
And Cifka's like, "Yerp."
Yep, this is why discard's so powerful, because it's like, all right, let's take a little look-ski poo on the cheap. What's going on here? And there's a negate.
Look, it's going to earn a negate, which it would likely take anyway.
Okay, so now are we feeling though it's worth fighting back? Okay, it looks like Kowalski does feel like this is worth fighting over. 2, 3, 4. Now, note, I'm doing a little math here, but if you dispute here, this negate, you don't have enough mana to cast the ultimatum, which is why actually that Binding the Old Gods last turn from Cifka is actually quite good. But now we see that, hey, he's without anything of relevance. So now, and this is where things get really good. If Cifka just peels off an ultimatum, just gonna
it's so gross. It's so disgusting. That now that's all Grzegorz is thinking, right? Just don't do it.
Yeah, just don't peel an ultimatum on me, please.
Don't do that. Just don't do the thing.
I got no reaction from Stan.
I don't believe he would give you one regardless.
That's fair. And now if you're Kowalski, you're just hanging here and you're like, don't peel a counterspell. Let me resolve my thing, because I'm going for it next turn.
Yeah, you know how it is. You get a little greedier, right? You're like, don't peel an ultimatum. And then when you kind of figure that they haven't, you're like, okay, just don't peel a negate then. We're going to see Heartless Act take down Yorion. That was Stan's turn. He paid the tax for Yorion and then just cast Yorion. And I think that we're going to see Grzegorz just windmill this Emergent Ultimatum onto the stack here. He's going to play his land first. 2, 3, 4. No, it doesn't matter. He can't pay for dispute anyway, so he's just going to put it on the stack. And immediately he gets options.
Whoop, there it is.
That is exactly what Kowalski has been maneuvering for the duration of this game. And I have to say, it's been really fun to watch him mitigate the risk. I mean, he could have cast this, 4 or 5 turns ago? He could have just thrown it on the stack and been like, hey, let's see what happens. And, through careful play and risk management, he was able to, almost ensure that he could resolve this Emergent Ultimatum. And the correlation of winning the game with after resolved ultimatum is very, very high, as we know.
Yes, it is.
To say the least.
Yeah.
Now he's put Stan in, a nearly impossible situation here, having to pick between Valki, Alrund's Epiphany, and Curabest the Sea God. It's hard to imagine Stan being able to beat any combination of those. He's going to give him a heck of a board state here. He's going to have Tybalt plus Curabest the Sea God.
Average.
Ugh. Good, clean fun here for Kowalski.
Okay, sure. Not a bad little turn here. Duress that.
That'll work.
One good ultimatum deserves another. Come on, Cifka.
Yeah, come on, Cifka. Let's just...
Come on.
Looks like he didn't find the answer, and he's going to go ahead and scoop him up. But Cifka was in the position of being up a game there, so that's just a tie. Now 1 game apiece between Grzegorz and Stan, and we're going to get a game 3 coming up.
Yes, we are. This matchup, especially after sideboard, it kind of turns into a bit of a slog, kind of a mess. I mean, the first game, it really does feel like, okay, I guess I'll say this. All the games feel like whoever resolves ultimatum first is going to win. The first game, you have to do this kind of balancing act of removal and counter spells and, all this other stuff because of your game 1 80-card deck. But then after sideboard, you get to kind of get some of the trash out of your deck, which is most of the removal. Get some of the goodies in your deck, which are counter spells or cards like Coma or Pelucranos, and it's not always going to be about resolving ultimatum to win. It kind of always looms over the game, but you can just play Pelucranos as a 4-mana 6/6 and win that way. So we'll see.
Yeah, we got to see Luis Scott Vargas play against Matt Sperling, and we saw Coma be the game winner. Speak of the devil. There's Coma.
Speak of the devil's chief engineer.
Ooh, and there's even all the colors of... Yeah, this is a very nice hand, although it does look like a 6-carder here for Grzegorz.
Good enough,
Yeah.
though. Got a little shiny little cultivate there.
Oh yeah, cultivate there, even Plaka predation to kind of see what's up. Coma doesn't care about counter spells, but you could maybe try to snipe a removal spell before you actually get Coma on the battlefield. But as you mentioned, a lot of times these players will be cutting some of their removal, so you're really kind of putting a lot of pressure on your opponent by casting a Coma, and the window's so narrow, right? If you get to make a serpent, it kind of ends. Here's Omen of the Sea for Cifka. No green mana here. And that looks like a Yorion payment and pass the turn back. So not a whole lot going on there for Stan. And we're going to see block of predation. Hey, we know about one target. There's Yorion. Oof. There's Cultivate, no green mana, but Fabled Passage next turn for it, plus Duress. Wow, that was going to be a sweet turn for Stan. In fact, it still may be, depending on what Grzegorz decides to take here.
It's actually a pretty nice hand.
It is. Yeah,
so,
that's a beaut.
Yeah, I could just see just saying, you know what, I'm going to take your best card. Like, if I take your Cultivate, you're probably going to play Binding, and that can kind of ramp you. And so green mana is not a problem. Yorion doesn't really matter enough to take that. And it'd be nice to be able to play the game without this ultimatum kind of looming over me the entire time, especially when I know about it. So if I take care of it, it's like, okay, if you peel one, there's not a lot I can do about that. So I'm just going to get rid of one of them.
Yeah, really critical here too. Duress to take away Cultivate, turns a hand that looks really powerful here for Kowalski into a hand that it's slow. Like, he's not going to be doing much for a while now. Are we going to see Valky get cast here? Like, no red mana in sight? This is a little rough here for Kowalski, but the Cultivate was really going to kind of open everything up for him.
Yeah, that's what it felt like, right? Like the casting that discard spell last turn, I was a little surprised. I'll be honest. I was expecting to see just a Cultivate get cast and, start to try to build maybe a little bit of a mana advantage, what have you. Now losing the Cultivate means that you're so much further away from Coma that I was a little bit surprised to not see the Cultivate cast last turn, and then Duress nabs it this past turn, and now trouble's brewing here for Kowalski.
Yeah, it actually did backfire on him pretty badly. He would much prefer to be casting a hand disruption spell this turn and getting that Cultivate out of his hand. It also would have bricked the Duress fully, which would have been nice for him. But yeah, as it turns out, he's on the slow road here. Now, the Mystical Dispute's the only card that Stan doesn't know about, and that could prove very powerful for him as well, because Stan looks and says, well, you've got 5 cards, and only one that I don't know about, and, oh, you drew it. That's annoying. Okay. So that is another blue mana source there for Kowalski.
Yep. Blue and green pathway. So this is fun, right? You have to play this little game of just like, okay, which pathway does what, so on and so forth. Let's get another look at the hand here. Valky for Valky.
It does seem to be the case, and it's Binding and Disdainful Stroke in hand.
Good cards to know about.
Yeah, these are relevant, and this does mean that if Coma can get on the stack, Coma's going to resolve and be a major problem here for Stan. That counterspell doesn't do anything. This is a brick on the Duress as well. The Binding follow-up. Both players working with a lot of information about what the other has. There's an island off the top of the library. And that means that we have the road cleared for a Yorion to hit the battlefield. It's not going to get any value, but it's just going to be a 4/5 flyer. But that does mean that next turn, Coma's going to show up.
Yep, and that card is, it's real good.
Really, really good, and demands an instant speed answer. And, if you're sitting in Grzegor's seat, there isn't one on the other side.
Now, I guess we can't forget, right, there should be a Valky in Cifka's hand, right? So get the opportunity to yank that. Let's say temporarily.
Sure.
Could be permanently, but I'm going to call it temporarily.
Agreed.
Right now.
This has been a game. So Valky takes the coma for now. Is there an answer for Kowalski that he can find? It's just a land off the top. Boy, he really needed some action here. This was a window for him to try to find some way to start getting that pressure rolling. And now he just has to say go.
So hang on.
Yeah, that can happen.
That's no. I'm just thinking, are we going to actually just see is Tibalt going to be up to some shenanigans here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Valky becomes a copy of Coma.
Yep, that's what I was thinking.
You have to pay 7.
But okay. I'll pay more than 7.
Yeah, totally. I'll pay all of it.
Yeah.
All of the mana.
I'm just like, I'm thinking Valky's about to be Coma here.
Yeah, it's true. This doesn't happen very often.
No.
But it ends up being that Valky, God of Lies, they went back and forth with them. So Stan decides not to do the copying.
Maybe it's a thing he just wants it, like, because you can do it at any time. Maybe it's just an end step thing.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was thinking you want to get the serpents rolling, right?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same thing. You know, it's a big chunk of damage too.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's 4 more damage, and you do get a serpent on each upkeep, so you would get one on Grzegorz' turn.
I guess I would say this, because we're coming from Kowalski's perspective. If Stan is not turning it into a Coma main phase, I'm dead.
Probably, right? I mean, I think that if I remember correctly, Grzegorz knows that there's a Disdainful Stroke in hand for Stan, so perhaps Stan, with not quite enough mana to do Coma plus Disdainful Stroke, just wants to protect against like a top-decked ultimatum.
Yeah. Now, Kowalski did find a copy of Heartless Act, so if Cifka tries to, end step, activate Valky for 7, turn this into Coma, response, blow that up, get my Coma back.
This is incredible. What a rip for Grzegorz, because now Stan's going to go for it, and he's going to get punished, because if he would have done it on his turn, I'm not saying that is correct, but if he would have a Serpent, and that could protect from this Heartless Act, and he's not going to have that now.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because okay, so he is actually going to go for it. I wasn't positive he was going to. So okay, now he makes his move, gets Heartless Acted. Okay, so that's a beat. So now the Coma comes back to the grip. You have the so, and it's funny, right? Because he had the opportunity to do it on his own turn, but we know he has a Disdainful Stroke, and we don't know the rest of the contents. But like, if you go for it on your own turn, and then Kowalski just is like, okay, ultimatum you, what are you doing, right?
Right, and you have the hard counter in your hand, right?
Yeah,
because that's one of the ways you could actually lose the game. But the risk you take is that Kowalski finds a removal spell. It must be that Stan figured that was a lesser risk, but it backfired because he did find it. Now, Stan did just resolve Alrund's Epiphany, trying to get something going, but he's going to need more than that.
All right, well, now we're seeing 2 cards go to the bottom on the scry on the upkeep with Omen of the Sea and draw a card. So this is... I actually like watching the game this way sometimes, because it feels like real life, where I'm just like, I'm in Kowalski's seat, and I'm, 2 turns ago, I'm like, oh God, I'm dead. They stole my Coma. I ain't got anything going on. Well, these are out of here. These stink.
Yeah. No Wolfalo Havens, thank you.
Yeah.
Elspeth's Nightmare, not too bad, but I mean, it's got to just be Coma. Coma a clock.
Also, you had Cifka on the upkeep of his last turn, sacrifice Omen of the Sea, which leads me to believe that he's like, I don't have anything.
Totally.
Right?
I mean, you could theoretically go for the Nightmare and then wait till next turn to cast Coma after the Nightmare's Duress effect triggers. But that feels very conservative. And Grzegorz is like, nah, I'm going for it. And this is the key moment here. Once that trigger resolves, he will have protection for Coma from the removal spells that Stan has access to for the most part. And Coma can just absolutely run away with the game. What an incredible swing back to Grzegorz. And that is GG.
Wow.
He picks up the victory in a super close game. Judgment called by Stan Cifka. He had to decide which of